I realized after last time that I didn't get to the point where I told you what happened to the people in that McMartin case. So I want to do that and also just give you some general, what's happened to so many other people in the hundreds of cases that I've testified in and studied in this arena of allegations of child sexual abuse, and also talk about, the potential impacts to children of being caught up in this kind of a ill thought out way of investigating. In the McMartin case, the people who went to jail were all 7 people who were accused in the beginning. That is Virginia McMartin, who was the founder of the school. She was the mother of Peggy McMartin, Peggy McMartin Bucky, who was, I think, in her 50s. And then the granddaughter of Virginia McMartin, Peggy Ann Bucky, and her brother Ray Bucky, who were in their 20s, also went to jail, and 3 teachers. So we had 7 people who went to jail. They stayed various amounts of time in jail. The longest, Ray Bucky, was 5 years in jail before he ever came to trial. His mother, Peggy Bucky, was in jail for about 3 years before she came to trial. All the others were released from jail because the charges were dropped against them. And why were the charges dropped? Well, I knew when I heard that it had to be bogus. It had to be illegitimate, because I knew all the evidence of the case. I knew what was alleged against what children. I knew that there wasn't any difference between the evidence against any of those 7 people from one to the other. That wasn't the nature of how the children's statements eventually came out. Well, what eventually became known is it was a new district attorney who came in. Phil Abosian was the district attorney when the case started. Neither he nor any of his attorneys had ever watched 1 minute of one videotape. Yet they had filed charges and kept in jail 7 people. When the new district attorney, Ira Reiner, came in and some of the people watched the videotapes, they were shocked and appalled. So much so that Ira Reiner said, the 5 people that we're now releasing, there was no evidence against them other than the accusation. We have no evidence that they have done anything. Now, the truth is there was no evidence that anybody had done anything, that any child, not a single child, had been molested there. But I can only think that for political reasons, they did not want to admit that the case that was already costing millions of dollars to Los Angeles County and being splashed all over the media was a fraud, completely bogus. Rather than admit that, they took Ray Bucky and his mother, Peggy Bucky, to trial. And there were hundreds of charges. They got not guilty. There was a not guilty verdict on all but about 15 counts against Ray Bucky and his mother. They dropped the charges completely against his mother, but went to trial again against Ray Bucky. In other words, he had not been found not guilty of everything, was not guilty about most everything, but about 15 counts, it was what's called a hung jury, not unanimous. So he went on trial, and now out of those 15, I think it was 3 counts where it was a hung verdict, a hung jury, and 12 counts or so in which it was not guilty. So in 2 lengthy trials, based on the same bogus evidence, they failed to get a single conviction. But Ray Bucky spent 5 years in prison. His mother spent 3 years in prison. All the people in the school teachers lost their homes and all their any assets that they had in order to pay for the legal services to defend himself. Peggy Ann Bucky had been released. She went to trial to get her job back. She was, again, the granddaughter of the founder of the school, a school teacher. She sued the school district to get her job back because they were not going to let her work anymore. She sued to get her back pay. I testified in the trial on the exact same evidence as in the criminal trial. And the administrative law judge agreed with us, ruled that there was no evidence for anything, and that she should get her job back and get her pay back. Ray Buckey never was convicted of anything, and they never went to a third trial. But he'll never get over the consequences, and I'll give you some detail on that. He had, when he was finally exonerated and was free, he began to try to help his father, who was getting quite ill. You can imagine the strain on Virginia McMartin's husband, or Ray Buckey's grandfather. And he was helping him with elderly type of care. And he liked doing that kind of work. So he got himself trained to give that kind of elder care. And this is information that I got from Peggy Ann Buckey, who I continued to know after the trial. And she told me that she was trying to help him get a job. And they began to search when facility after facility was not hiring him. And they found that there were still records being maintained on a computer data bank by the state of California that he was a felon, because there were still charges which had never been finalized, meaning the jury was hung on 3 counts, so he was guilty until proven innocent, just the opposite of what our legal system mandates. So Ray Buckey's life was, do we say destroyed? I don't want to say that, because only he could speak for himself. You be the judge. Let's look at what's happened in other cases. I will tell you that of the about 1,000 cases that I've studied, and about 500 of them I've testified in, I don't think that all but a few cases that I've ever seen did I believe that the person accused had ever done what they were accused of. Now, let me quickly add, that doesn't mean that I think the percentages would be that low in the cases that I haven't seen, because there's a natural bias or selection of how cases get referred. When an attorney has a case where they have good evidence, not the kind of phony interview evidence or phony medical evidence that sometimes happens, I'm not going to get a call, or somebody who would give the kind of testimony or review these methods. So we know that sexual abuse occurs, and we know that if it does occur, it should be a crime, and there needs to be a punishment for it. No question about it. But in my mind, I am completely clear that the percentage of false accusations is very, very significant. We don't need to know what the exact number is. Nobody knows what the exact number is. And anybody who tells you that they can give you a percentage on false versus true accusations, they're not trustworthy, because there is no method to do it. All we need to know is that it's happening, and it's happening too much. I am convinced that there are thousands of innocent people in prison to this very day for decades, or essentially life, for allegations which destroy their life. And then let's look last at what does it do to a child. Many of these children get sent to therapists. Regardless of what happens in the legal case, they get sent to therapists who are handpicked by social workers and police, and are known to be in the same mindset as those who were doing the McMartin interviews, that if a child is in a case where there's an allegation, you can assume that it was done to them, they are victimized, and we need to help them. The child is then subjected to repetitive interviews which ask them to describe sexual abuse, tell them how much it was not right for that to happen. A child may have an important person in their life, now will be seen by that child for the rest of their life as somebody who did something wrong to them. The consequences are enormous. The need for reform is enormous, and it will not happen unless a movement is generated to investigate the system of investigation, to investigate the social work interviews, to investigate the nurses and pediatricians who are reporting inappropriate findings in these cases, to investigate the prosecutors who do not care what the truth is. When they get the allegation, if they think they can get a guilty verdict, regardless of what their training should tell them about what the evidence really shows, will go right ahead and seek a conviction with all the vigor that they can. Only outsiders will ever bring any change to this. And that's going to have to come from the people, and probably from people who have had experience with it. Unfortunately, people who've been in investigations and have seen how badly the system is operating. I very much hope that happens. And as I've been doing for 30 years, stand ready to cooperate and assist anything like that to get going. Thanks for being here. See you next time.